Yes, guys, welcome back to SFeatleyTV. We're here for the Second Flag Show once again, and I'm joined by my good friend Adam from DNF1. How are you, my friend?
Hi, Stephen. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, feeling pretty good. It's nice end to the week. It's Friday. So, yeah, things can't be better at the moment.
Yeah, obviously Friday we've had practice one, practice two, for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix at Imola, and yes, we'll go in a bit of that before we get into the main topic. Obviously, we're all expecting Red Bull to come back with their advantage that they had in Bahrain, probably even more an advantage. The fact with the Imola circuit being the way it is, but that doesn't seem to look like to be the case in practice. Both teams, Mercedes and Red Bull, are pretty happy with the car, and probably with also Red Bull's issues throughout practice. Mercedes could be looking at very positively going into practice three and potentially qualifying.
Yeah, I mean, Red Bull have got a lot to do tomorrow. Fortunately for them, they were able to recover Max's car relatively quickly. Not sure if they were able to do a final run with Max just to shake off any cobwebs before Charles Leclerc going into the wall at Tamburello too. But definitely a lot of work for them. Mercedes obviously will be very happy today. They were probably worried, as some people might have been, that Imola might have not been a track that they may have been happy to go to after what issues they've had from Bahrain. But they had a very solid day, looked very quick, looked very comfortable, no issues whatsoever. So all to play for tomorrow, but Red Bull got plenty of catching up that they're still going to need to do.
I think the main highlight is that as well is that if you look at both sessions, Bottas was exceedingly quick, as well as Hamilton. So again, both Mercedes at the top of their game. Perez still looking like he's trying to find his feet. Obviously, had that weird incident with Ocon in practice one, and unfortunately, no one could pick it up in it's always the one clip you never could find. Like it's like you scour through YouTube for a clip and you can't find it.
Yeah.
It seems that was just a part of the track they never sort of caught any sort of cameras on. But yeah, obviously Perez was still finding his feet. It again plays into Mercedes's hands because it's two against one. It's Verstappen trying to take on both Mercedes, which he struggled with in Bahrain.
Yeah, I mean, in practice one, Perez's pace was pretty solid, despite having that incident earlier on, obviously, that we didn't see, and probably not much that you could do about it. In practice two, you're right, he was a second off the pace, but from what I understand, Red Bull, because of the issues they had with Max, their primary focus was making sure that the long run pace, or at least they understood the tyres, how they were going to react to long runs in general. It will shape up how the race is going to unfold over the weekend. So Perez kind of had to do the job for both himself and Max Verstappen in that race. So I'm expecting Red Bull to have a lot more pace in the car, and I would not be surprised if it is as close as it was in Bahrain. As I said before, I'm expecting 4 cars competing for the win. So I wouldn't count Red Bull out yet, but so far, definitely advantage Mercedes.
Yeah. What I want everyone to do, obviously, is hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, share it on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, you name it, share it, and yeah, get it out there. We're still trying to get up to 1K, 130 off that. So please, if you can, hit the subscribe button. Go and check out DNF1 as well, doing amazing content there for all things F1. So go and give them go and give him a subscribe as well, and get him on the way to success. The same that obviously Mercedes and Red Bull are fighting towards at the minute, and yeah, it makes it really intriguing. And obviously, you mentioned about Charles Leclerc, and yes, he had that shunt, but I think Ferrari could be very happy with the way their plans have gone today.
Yeah, absolutely. Ferrari will obviously have looked at this race, bringing a few improvements to the car. Off the back of what they did in Bahrain, I think they were relatively happy with Bahrain. I think from what we've seen in the first 2 sessions, Ferrari do look pretty quick. If anything, they look the quickest team outside the front 2. not too far off Red Bull and Mercedes, it looks at the moment. So if Ferrari can continue that pace in qualifying, where it's going to be so critical to get a good result in qualifying, they could be in shape to score big points. And not just Charles Leclerc, but Carlos Sainz as well. Of course, Ferrari will not be too keen on what happens towards the end of the session. They could have done without Charles Leclerc going into Tamburello 2 with perhaps a bit too much speed, pushing very, very hard. He had a lap time deleted for extending track limits at turn 9, which would have been the fastest time of the session. So Ferrari look in good shape. Hopefully for their sake, it's not a false dawn and that they weren't deliberately running lighter than everybody else and that they can carry that on tomorrow.
Yeah, obviously that's the thing with practice. You never know quite when one team's running long ones and one team's doing short run pace. So yeah, it's always difficult to tell at the same time. But obviously Ferrari can always look that sort of positively going forward. I think one team again, and I think we were going to know that we were going to struggle, and they're going to struggle all season, is Haas again. And like your brother's already like putting in the mad comments already. Right, big up 1892 Red Podcast, Mazepin for the win. And Mazepin, I think he's going to win the Let's Try to Put It in the Wall award. Because I think that's twice. I think it's twice now, and I think you saw the difference. I think with Charles Leclerc, where he could clip the gravel and get away with it, whereas maybe Mazepin, maybe because he's got a slower car and the car that's not great and it's already a handful, but I just don't think he's probably the level of driver Charles Leclerc as well. Is that he touches the gravel and has a tank slap and puts it in the wall. And do you feel with Gunther Steiner agree? Because Gunther Steiner has come out and said that he's trying too hard. Do you feel that's the case with Mazepin in a minute?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You know, I grew up doing karting myself and racing to some degree. And one of the worst things that you can do when you realize you're in a car that's slower than your opposition is try to overdrive and make up the deficit that way, because all you're going to end up doing is getting to a point where you're pushing beyond your limit and the car's limit. And this is a hard enough car to drive as it is. And you're going to end up making mistakes like he has already done and will continue to do so. The saving grace in all of this is that at the moment, because Haas are so far off the pace, the chances are he's not going to be driving into someone else or having an accident and someone else gets caught up in it, like collateral damage, in the way that Ocon got caught up in Perez's incident this morning. The fear is, though, there will come a point this season that if Mazepin's performances don't improve in terms of his overall car control, that could very well happen to someone, and that presents its own safety risk. And for Nikita Mazepin, a driver that wants everybody to judge him on his driving rather than his off-track activities over the winter break, which will be a very hard sell without even turning a wheel, is not doing himself many favors at this point in time. So the only thing I can suggest to him is to just listen to how your car behaves, take in all the data you can, just find a rhythm that works for you and just build yourself up slowly there. Because if he keeps trying to overdrive it as he has been, as Gunther Steiner's already picked up, he's only going to continue to keep spinning around, damaging the car. And the irony is, Stephen, is that it's no secret that Mazepin is in this car because of the financial connections that his family has to Uralkali and, you know, other sponsors that he's brought into the Haas team. The irony is that Haas are going to end up having to spend the money that the Mazepin family have provided them on fixing Mazepin's car. They're not really getting a return on it. So it's something he needs to address and needs to work on. If it means slowing down a little bit on his ultimate pace, so be it. They'd rather him finish the race and learn the lessons and improve over the course of the season than trying to set a banzai lap that gets you into Q2 like George Russell tends to do in the Williams, and more likely put it into the barrier after 3 corners.
Yeah. Bargav, big up to you, mate. As always, you've been a great support of this channel and great support of me and all that we do, mate. And yeah, I hope you're taking a well on break and you're doing well, mate. And big up to you. Big up, guys. Saw Adam's Imola preview. Really excited to see what Ferrari can do. Obviously, he's a Ferrari fan. And as we just discussed there, Ferrari, like looking very decent shape to see what they can do. Maybe nick a podium. You never know. If there's problems with, we know what Charles Leclerc can do in an underperforming Ferrari. So if it's half decent, then you never know. It can just take one good qualifying lap. Do you see that with Charles Leclerc?
Absolutely. I said on an episode of mine actually before about Charles Leclerc that when he came to Ferrari, statistically speaking, he had the worst qualifying record of any driver. And the statistic was that in terms of his qualifying performance, his ultimate lap time would be comprised of 3 sectors as it is for everyone else. But he was the worst driver at being able to put together his best 3 sectors at his fastest lap of anyone in the field. Sebastian Vettel at the time, ironically, was the best at doing that. Now, I don't know what the statistics are on this, but Charles Leclerc has become very much a qualifying maestro. Amongst other things he does need to work on even still, he has certainly added qualifying pace to his arsenal, and that cannot be understated in this modern era of F1 cars, especially at tracks like Imola. So you're absolutely right, Stephen. If an opportunity does present itself in this race, as it did last year, we had Max Verstappen, who would very much like to banish the woes of previous Italian Grand Prix. I think he hasn't finished in the last 4 or 5 Italian Grand Prix, and his best, if you include the Imola races as Italian and Mugello as well, his best finish at an Italian Grand Prix of any kind is a top 5, is 5th place. So it's not a good omen or good record for Max. So if something, if something does happen similar to what happened to Max last season, and which gave Daniel Ricciardo a well-earned podium for Renault, Ferrari will very much be looking forward to try and put themselves in a position to capitalize and maybe get a podium, or maybe 2, because Carlos Sainz looks a lot quicker than he did in Bahrain. He seems to have found his feet a bit more, and that's encouraging signs for Ferrari. Not quite on the ultimate pace of Leclerc, but overall he does look very handy at the moment.
Yeah, Ansi Perez struggled and will continue unless he magically finds pace in qualifying tomorrow. But he has never been amazing in quali. He's mainly been a racing due to his tyre. Yeah, his tyre saver. I remember his first Grand Prix in Australia 2011, right? And he was the only one at the whole field that did one pit stop. I mean, you had Mercedes who were doing 4 pit stops in a Grand Prix, whereas he did 1 pit stop in that Grand Prix and got a really good, I think he's got a points finish in that race. So yeah, his tire saving techniques are well known, and just gonna have to go through. Miss Mel, Max needs to win this weekend. Big up to you, Miss Mel, as always. Always showing our love and support to the channel. Yeah, Max needs to win this weekend. It's as simple as that. It's like you said last week, he's now got to start winning races that he's expected to win.
Yeah, I mean, the patterns are going to, and, the shift to power is going to change so much this season between Mercedes and Red Bull. Mercedes look like they have done quite a lot of work in the last couple of weeks to sort of address any issues that they can deal with owing to their lower rate concept, I should say, the issues that they've been having, contrary to Aston Martin and Otmar Zafna, who just seem to constantly complain and try to find a resolution that suits them, which I can tell you now from people that have been saying, oh, they're going to change the regulations halfway through the season. Well, they wouldn't normally do it unless it's for safety grounds. They're definitely not going to do it this year with a new set of regulations coming 2022. So with all due respect to Aston Martin, the only thing I can say to you guys is suck it up and just try and make the best of what you can. That's all you can do, unfortunately, because you're not going to win any legal proceedings or whatsoever. That said, with Red Bull and Mercedes, it's going to go back and forth this season. It's going to be similar, in my opinion, to what happened in 2018 between Ferrari and Mercedes. There will be times where Mercedes will be on top. There will be times where Red Bull is going to be on top. What's critical for Red Bull, and as I've said constantly on this channel and my own channel, is that if Red Bull and Max Verstappen are going to win this World Championship, they have to make sure more than anything else, they start winning races that they are meant to win, not give Mercedes any more opportunities than they would like, because we know Mercedes Mercedes will gobble them up better than anyone else that we have seen in Formula One over the last 15, 20 years. I mean, we're talking Michael Schumacher, Ferrari levels of capitalizing on your rivals' errors. That's how dangerous and how good Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton are, even if they don't have the best car.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you go back to those sort of days, and I see that sort of championship happening. I mean, I remember Hamilton's first season, and his second season fighting for the championship, and again to and fro between McLaren and Ferrari. This time it's Mercedes and Red Bull, and it's going to be that sort of thing where you're going to have a few races where Red Bull are going to be dominant, then you have a few races where Mercedes are going to be dominant, and I think it's going to be that sort of pendulum between Verstappen and Hamilton. Anybody play F1 game here? I want to do Bargab, after what you tried to do in the wet, right? I'd ruin you. Right?
Interesting. Do tell, Stephen.
Basically, he decided that in 6 weeks he was going to try and challenge us to an F1 race, and obviously I play it on about 80% expert, something like that, and no driver aids whatsoever. So he was going to try it with no driver aids for about the first time and play it in the wet. He never thought about playing it in the wet, that you don't have to weave left and right in the straight to warm the tyres up.
No.
You don't need to do that. And all you're going to do is just spin and start doing circles. And he's getting there slowly, but he's got a long way to go.
It reminds me
back a new game, though.
Yes, I had. Yeah, I'll definitely be looking forward to playing that when I get a chance. Shame I don't have my old sim rig that I used to have since I moved. I've had to stick with a pad for now, so that's kind of hindered my performance behind the wheel, if you like. But I'll certainly be looking forward to that when it comes out. I think it's in July or something like that, or June, one of them.
Yeah, luckily because my dad's inheritance, I got an F1 sort of play seat that they use for the esports stuff, and they had a limited edition steering when it came out last year, so we got that one as well, and it's got all the diffs and
Fanatec
switches and everything. Literally like literally before all the screens came of the digital.
I see.
Screens.
Yeah.
So just like a 2013 style, but with all the diffs where you can actually set all the different switches for the differential and stuff like that, so you don't have to go schooling for a menu. But,
no, that's pretty cool. I like that.
It's quite good. It's quite tiring though, but it's fun. It's really, really fun, and I'll definitely be trying that on there, because apparently got the Chequered Grand Prix as well from last year. They're going to put that on the game as well, so that'll be nice as well as all the shortened circuits and having some historical circuits on there as well. So apparently that's what they're looking forward to. But but obviously we'll move on to the main topic of the discussion that we're going to have, and that obviously I was had some sort of downtime whilst they're waiting in hospital. There's so much waiting time, so watched a bit of Netflix and watched obviously Drive to Survive and saw Grosjean's accident again. And I didn't know why I didn't do a podcast about it back then, but I'm going to do one now. Is when we saw that accident, it should never have been piercing about it in the first place. B, and should never have tore the car in half. And okay, you see the cockpit itself, the actual cell is not broken or anything like that, but to see the car teared so much that it catches fire because of all the fuel, it makes me wonder how safe are modern F1 cars, and obviously how we got to this point, but and what we need to do to try and make that safer in the future, so that we don't sort of have that accident again. And because we never know, Grosjean could have gone through that wall and could have been out for the count, and if he was out for the count, he was dead, he was gone. So it's more trying to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest takeaways from that incident, and that was very, very hard to watch. I've seen many different things in my time as a Formula One fan, and that was one of the scariest moments I think I've ever witnessed watching a Formula One race. Just to watch them go down that straight, one car veer off to the right hand side, and then all you see is a big explosion and flames. You fear the worst. These modern day Formula One cars aren't supposed to do that. That was a huge surprise to a lot of people. We've had some real big shunts during this turbo hybrid era, and we've never seen a car go up in flames quite like that.
You've
So,
never seen them back
yeah,
in time, like with Schumacher's era. Like some of them hit concrete walls at 200 miles an hour in Indianapolis, and yeah, they get broken back. But you're like, yeah, they're not like, because there's padding, man. There's the fuel tanks and everything. It's not really a problem. And to see that, it was just, even me, like I was like, oh my god, get him out, just get him out now, right? And it's just so thankful that Grosjean was still awake at the time.
yeah. Well, I mean, with the Kevlar padding around the sort of survival cell, if you like, where the car, they call it the monocoque, if you like, where the driver is seated, that kind of broke away from the rear end of the car.
From the MP4 one, didn't it? Yeah,
that's right. Originally, yeah, and Grosjean was seated in that car for 27 seconds. His left foot was trapped. That's why he lost his shoe, because his left foot was trapped in that part of the car, and you know, so many things had to happen for that incident to occur the way it did. As you mentioned, the barrier was not quite able to handle that level of impact. I mean, the report I read showed an impact of 67 G, which is insane. To put that in perspective, guys, a normal Formula One car would maximize around 5 or 6 G at the very most. We're talking fighter pilot levels of turning ability or gravitational force.
Oxygen mask to breathe.
Absolutely. Or any of those special trousers that they have to kind of keep the blood flow in their legs without it going all over the place. Anyone's interested, have a look. It's quite interesting. But
great comment there.
60 it has, yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah. And I'm going to get to this point as well. But 67 G. So almost 11 times higher than the maximum energy output in a Formula One car for a corner has hit Grosjean and hit the car. It's completely decimated the car into two pieces. And as 1892 Red Podcast just pointed out, the halo played a huge part in saving Romain Grosjean's life, amongst other things as well. The advancements in the biotech that he has on his gloves, the hands device on his neck and shoulders to make sure it's stabilized. Obviously, that was introduced in 2003, so that's still relatively new. The improvements, enhancements to the racing suit that he was actually wearing, and this was quite a recent change. I read up on this, that his racing suit was introduced, I think it was about a year and a half ago. And obviously they're flame retardant, but only to a degree, and they only last for so long. So it's not a case of you can just walk through fire in one of those suits and the fires won't bother you. It gives you a certain amount of time before the fire starts to become an issue, and this is around 20 to 30 seconds. Now, before it was about half that time. So you can imagine if he was wearing a race suit a couple of years older than what this one was, that could have been the difference between Romain escaping with minor burns to his hands and feet versus Romain struggling to survive, in the same way that Niki Lauda did when he has his fiery crash at the 76 German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring all them years ago. So
and he was there for far longer. He was there for about a minute, because
absolutely,
the problem with that accident is that and this is what I love, because we can go back in history and compare sort of the accidents and the history, is that he was surviving, but unfortunately his helmet was the sort of force of the impact has thrown his helmet off. So he's not only just got the protection of his helmet, then he's only just got the balaclava, which I think now has been improved to try and make it fire retardant.
Yeah,
is that not just that as well, is the fact that he was stuck in there for about over a minute, because they were trying to get the belts, and because Ferrari have special belts, there was only sort of one driver who had managed to finally get there at the time, who had been at Ferrari and knew how to undo them, because they had their new own sort of safety 6-strap belts that were super protective, really, really good in keeping you from being thrown around in the car at a massive impact. But no one knew how to undo them. So
it was only Clay Regazzoni that
Yeah,
really knew to do that at the time, Nicky Lauda's teammate. No, you're absolutely right, Stephen. And going back to the Grosjean incident, when we saw the report, I think it was about 20 things that the FIA identified that could be improved on, including stuff like the barrier, obviously how the car handles the impact. I mean, the car did its job ultimately. It broke away and absorbed the impact as it would do. The last thing you wanted to do is all stay together and that impact just goes straight back into the driver, because that would have probably killed him, the impact alone. So the car did its job amazingly there. And we can go into all of the details to try and basically explain how Roman Grosjean survived. Ultimately, the Halo did a great job amongst it. It split the barrier, gave him that opportunity to escape, which he did. And Dr. Adam van der Merwe and Dr. Ian Roberts were there straight away on the scene, 10 seconds in, to assist Roman.
That's another thing that Watkins said. I have to be at the start of every Grand Prix. I remember one German Grand Prix where they wouldn't allow it, and there was like this politics between it. And I think it was in that, like, I remember suggesting you on Twitter about the One Life on the Limit. And if you guys haven't seen it, One Life on the Limit, go check it out. It goes back to up to 2013, but gives you a great insight about safety and how it's developed. And one of the times about Sid Watkins is that they were doing a German Grand Prix, and they said we wouldn't let him sit on the back of the grid for the start of the race. And Bernie being Bernie, were like, pack this, we're leaving. And they said, what am I supposed to do? 120,000 fans. Well, you can go tell them to fuck themselves. and he was like, yeah, okay, he can sit on the back of the grid, it's not a problem. And obviously you could saw straight as soon as the accident happened, that car was literally about as fast as an F1 car would go, as fast as an F1 car would go, literally rush into the scene. So, yeah.
I mean, so many great changes have been made in safety. I mean, the reality is, and not a lot of people will like to hear this, but unfortunately, this is the reality, is that it's so hard in these situations to be proactive rather than reactive. It really is.
Yeah.
More often than not, F1 and other sports as well, but F1 in particular, tends to learn a lot more from incidents like this in terms of improving the safety of the sport than it does by trying to come up with ideas and scenarios of what should happen. Because in their mind, of course, they're looking for ways to improve safety all the time. It never stops. But you tend to learn more from these incidents because it's a real life scenario of something that they say shouldn't happen or is unlikely, but it ends up happening. And fortunately, in this case, this is one of those incidents where the driver was able to walk away from the incident. We haven't been so lucky in the past. There have been 2 previous occasions in my memory that have influenced huge change in safety, unfortunately, as the result of a driver's life. And that was Ayrton Senna in 1994 and Jules Bianchi in 2014. Now, of course,
we're talking about this, and we got Imola coming up as well. So.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, I can give you an example where changes were made immediately. Following Ayrton Senna's sad death in '94 was the FIA and Formula One, and as you mentioned, Dr. Sid Watkins as well, or Professor Sid Watkins, I should say. They went around the entire calendar, forced all of the tracks organizers to review their circuits, the barriers, the gravel, all the off-track areas, everything, to make sure that they could find better ways or remove certain areas of the track, as we saw at that corner that Senna went off, which obviously has now become the Senna
three-way chicane, isn't it?
Exactly,
it's Senna S. It's not what it used to be. For people that don't know, right, turns 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 didn't actually exist. It used to be you come out from the last chicane, because you can still see where the chicane is now compared to where it is in terms of the new circuit, because now they just go straight, but you can actually go left and right and onto a chicane. But you can see where it was then, and still is now. And then you go from there, and it was full out, right? Brown Tamburello all the way to the hairpin, and it was flat out. There was no chicanes, one long turn, and there was a concrete barrier around the end of it. And they didn't think they had a problem because they had Berger before, had a massive fiery one accident, and there wasn't a problem. And it just how it happened that I think Senna was running so low on pressures, I believe, because they had a safety car at the start of the Grand Prix, which
That's
if
right.
people
Yeah.
don't know, because if you have cold tires, you lower the tire pressures, lower the car, and if you skip the floor and skid it, you lose all the downforce every time you hit the floor, and that's what they believed happened, which made him skate straight off the road because he needs the downforce to get around that corner. If he's got that downforce, he's going straight on. It's as simple as that. So yeah, and obviously they didn't have wheel tethers back then. They didn't have all the other stuff that could have probably saved him in sort of the aftermath of the accident.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned wheel tethers. I mean, that was influenced by the huge crash on the opening lap of the 1998 Belgian Grand Prix, where I think only 3 drivers managed to get out of that, and that was Hakkinen, Villeneuve, and Schumacher. Everyone else had been caught up in a huge crash. Now, fortunately, of course, for that race, we had T cars, so everybody practically jumped in their spare car other than the front 3.
God, imagine the start of that.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about Indianapolis in 05. Like, it would have been Belgium with just 3 cars.
Well, at least they could say to the FI, at least they would say to the fans, "Boy, it ain't our fault."
Yeah, that's it.
Drivers.
Yeah, that's it. We're coming out of La Source. You have a slow car, and it was raining, of course, very foggy. No one could see, and it was just absolute chaos. But that incident, with all the wheels flying everywhere, the carnage and everything else, basically prompted the FIA to look into this, and that's when they introduced the Kevlar prongs that you see now on the cars. I think there's 3 of them per tire on the front suspension, and that stops the tires flying off now. That's why when a team sees a tire fly off their car, which is extremely rare, there's a big issue, because obviously they have to ensure that those safety measures in place. I mean, we already talked about the hands device in 03, obviously basically the neck wear, if you like, and obviously, you know, to make sure the driver's vital signs are okay. Stuff like the refueling ban as well in 2010 because of the issues with the fires that happened on the car. I mean, Jim, if you remember Jos Verstappen in 1994 at the German Grand Prix, his car set up in flames, and that was kind of, it wasn't an uncommon incident, but that one just shocked so many people, where a splash of fuel went over the car and all of a sudden it just combusted. Thankfully, Jos was okay. And obviously he was able to do his part a few years later in delivering Osprey that is now doing rather well in Formula One today. So it certainly did its job in protecting that element of Jos, if you like. I won't go into too much details. It's not that kind of podcast or show, I should say. But for the kids, all the kids out there. But yeah, you know, if Formula One safety measures have really taken a huge step forward, and I think we have to accept that sometimes I think we're all victim of this, into thinking that Formula One is a lot more safer than perhaps it is, or we're given this not a facade, but perhaps this perception that it's that nothing bad can happen to these drivers anymore.
Because I obviously, we had the death in 94. I was born in October 94. So until Bianchi's crash in 2014, right, I generally had this thought that, yeah, I've seen cars hit 200 mile an hour in a wall, and yeah, they've been absolutely fine. So, like, yeah, they've had severe crashes, and right, but there's been no real sort of crashes where I could say I was really worried that guy was really going to lose his life, because they were that safe, and I had that sort of that perception that F1 is safe enough. And then obviously Bianchi's, which was a complete freak accident in the Grand Prix, that yeah, because there's so many other things, and that yeah, and then that sort of just like, when I heard that on the news, well, I didn't hear on the news because obviously I couldn't follow the race live because of BBC highlights and stuff like that. But I got, I think my dad called me about the news, and I was like, "Nah, you're joking," because I didn't actually see the incident. We didn't see the incident. We just
heard that Bianchi
had not on. Yeah, because we heard that the Bianchi had not come back to the pits. And we're like, okay, must be hit a wall or something. Must have crashed out. or spun out or something. And yeah, then when they announced it on the news, like that he's critical in hospital, nah. Then obviously at the end, like it went till Hungary 2015 that we knew that he wasn't going to be able to be saved. So
Yeah.
which then you sort of then brought the reality is that yeah, it isn't safe, and that's the risk they take every time they get in a car, which is why you have sort of driving standards and also other regulations in the rules to say if they do something dangerous, like ignore a yellow flag or cut someone off when they're about to dive down the inside, right? That yeah, that you're going to get punished for that because you can cause an accident.
Mm.
It's 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 something that now that once you see it and you've seen it happen, even like with F2, I mean, like last year with well, 2 years ago with Antoine Hubert, is that you then just sort of just yeah, everyone loves an accident. Let's be honest, right? We all love to see someone getting it wrong and hitting the barriers, right, and having an accident. But we don't want to see people really getting hurt or even worse than that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, we're always looking for action and excitement, but sometimes things can go too far. I mean, we look at the 2012 European Grand Prix in Valencia, where Mark Webber famously somersaulted after driving into the back of Heikki Kovalainen's Caterham. And all Mark ended up doing, and this probably had to do with the Aussie toughness as well, but, you know, that sort of image, if you like. But Mark basically walked away with nothing more damage than his pride at driving into the back of a back marker in that race. A little bit shooken up, but otherwise absolutely fine. And you can see an incident like that where people were sort of worried, where you've seen in other sports like power boats used to flip over all the time when they go too fast. And that used to be extremely dangerous. In Formula One, you'd see something like that and you'd worry, you'd fear the worst. And seeing an incident like that and seeing Mark walk away just showed how much safer Formula One cars had gotten over the years. But we shouldn't forget how dangerous this sport can really be. And then sometimes we end up receiving a cruel reminder as to how dangerous it can be with Grosjean, with Antoine Hubert, of course, Juan Manuel Correa, of course, who's only just returned to Formula 3 this season after being out of the sport for 18 months because of the injuries he sustained, which jeopardized his career. So whilst Formula One may, you know, you can't accuse them of taking a backseat or resting on their laurels, if you like, but I mean, from the Grosjean incident, as I said, 20 things that they found in that report that can be improved on. I mean, I made a list of them from the report. I believe from what I'd read, just scrolling through there. Yeah, it was so the FIA safety.
Show it on the screen if you want to.
Oh, no, so I've got it on my phone. So I'll just read it from here if that's all right. But the FIA safety director, Adam Baker, when he, you know, put this report out, he'd said that incidents involving fire of this scale are thankfully rare. So it's very important to learn what we can, including the interaction with the car's high voltage system. You know, obviously the electronics had a part to play in the overall fire because of the Kevlar fuel cells that they had were kind of combusted alongside that. And, you know, it was going on to add areas where changes will actually be made, say stuff like the geometry of the front of the car survival cell, to, you know, to they can take additional load, head restraints, engine mounting, fuel cell installations, reviews of the barrier design that you've already mentioned earlier, Stephen, and the process of approving circuits, because Formula One circuits these days, the only way you can get onto the F1 calendar if you own a circuit is for it to be considered grade 1 for safety. Some people look at the Nürburgring or the Nordschleife, if you like to call it that, and wonder why that can't be back on the F1 calendar. Well, that's a grade 3 circuit. You can have touring car races on there. You can have other series, but not Formula One. And to be honest, I can give you the lowdown now on why or what that would take to become a grade 1 circuit. First of which, they'd have to relayer the tarmac. That would probably cost about $30-40 million to do. for a circuit of that size. It's about 160 odd turns, 30 or 16 miles of circuit. That's just not going to happen. Considering that a lot of the circuit, the tarmac is actually, there's lots of images and words inscribed in there from children over the years and people that visit the circuit. They're not going to pave over that. You know, they should, if they want to host an F1 race, they'd have to install more runoff areas. They'd have to install, you know, they have the hospital and the health center right next to the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit, but they'd probably have to install another one at a certain point during the Nordschleife circuit just to make that safe. Access for marshals and everything else. The broadcasting, not that that's a factor in health and safety, but they would need to make areas available so that they can broadcast the race properly rather than just certain areas. And it would just be, absolutely, marshalling as well. They probably have to.
Impossible.
Impossible. And this is a circuit that the public can turn up to. You can go to the Nürburgring for like a Euro. You can do a lap round the circuit because it's like the most famous circuit in the world. The Green Hell, Jackie Stewart once referred to it as in the 70s. And he knows a thing or two about racing. He knows a thing or two about safety. He was very much involved in safety measures that were introduced into the sport.
He was probably the first person who sort of started lobbying for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about a sport that it took about 10 years before they introduced seatbelts. It wasn't until the early 60s when seatbelts were introduced in the sport. Helmets were
safe. It was safer to be flung from the car. But I remember one incident in the 50s where the car was somersaulting and the guy was thrown out whilst it was somersaulting, and he gets up and walks up. And they consider that safer than having a seatbelt, which is today in our world is mad. It's just mad. But back in the 50s, that was considered safer because they didn't. Probably because they didn't have the safety to be able to back up staying in the car or something. I don't know. Logic defies me.
Well, this is what I was saying earlier, Stephen. It's very much reactionary process. We can come up with so many different scenarios of what can happen and stuff that has potentially happened, but drivers have been able to walk away with it, with nothing more than their pride being dented a little bit. And that's always the best scenario because you've got no damage to it. But unfortunately, we're not always so lucky. As I said, some of the drivers have already mentioned Roland Ratzenberger. Of course, let's not forget him. On the same weekend, we lost him as well as Ayrton Senna. And if it wasn't for the tyre walls that saved Rubens Barrichello, we could have easily lost him as well at that same race when he was driving for Jordan. Went off at Tamburello too in a big way. And, you look at the safety measures that are being introduced into Formula One all the time. It was the old Tamburello. So we had Tamburello originally, but it was what's Tamburello 2 now. Because, of course, Tamburello 1 and Tamburello 2 are in the final sector where it was. I don't think it was called that before, but that's what Tamburello 2 was back in the 90s. But, it's come a long way, but it's certainly not 100% safe. I don't think the sport ever will be 100% safe. There's always an element of risk. And I think that's something that people need to be reminded about. This is why when I grew up in karting, they were very, very strict on it being a no contact sport. When you had a couple of guys just like jostling for position, going into each other, trying to push each other over, they got taken off the circuit straight away. And this was in the late 90s. So imagine how strict they must be with it now, with kids growing up. I mean, super license rules have now been revised. We'll never get another Max Verstappen in Formula One purely because because he'd be too young. And I agree with that. I don't think that drivers can be expected to have that level of maturity across the board until they're at least 18. If you can't drive a car in most countries until you're 18, you shouldn't be able to drive a Formula One car, regardless of how good you are, because it's not just about your own safety, it's the safety of everyone else on that circuit. And when you become a risk to that, and you're not emotionally and mature enough at such a young age, regardless of your talent, then you start after asking questions in Formula, because it was going to go down a point, Stephen, where it just get more ridiculous. Like, where's the next Max Verstappen? Where's the next driver of that age? You never expect it to happen. But if they're that good, then they're old enough. But are they safe enough and mature enough to understand the risks involved? That's always a question that gets asked.
Very early in his career as well, is that, okay, there were certain maneuvers where, he was absolutely brilliant in some of the overtakes he was doing. But then some of the maneuvers, like sort of, that I think Kimi Räikkönen had a couple of instances with him. I think Vettel did as well. Is that is that he would very much he would very much cut across. He would like just not give in and run off the road and try and just exceed the track limits to stay to try and stay in front. And it's just sort of little maneuvers like that. Is like, yeah, all right, mate, right, rein it in, right, right. Otherwise, you're not respecting the safety of F1, and that's just sort of maybe the sort of thing that I've always had a bugbear with him is that is he the mature enough person to respect the safety of Formula One in general? So yeah, that's probably why I've sort of probably got that bugbear with him. But
well,
yeah,
Grosjean Verstappen 2015 Monaco, I think is your prime example of a 16-year-old with all the talent in the world and plenty more to come with that. Plenty of edges to his overall attributes. But the one in particular, as you've mentioned, perhaps awareness of the other drivers around him or what's going on in the Formula One car. And in that incident, he just drove into the back of Grosjean in Monaco, of all places, and kind of shrugged it off as like, well, you know, what do you want me to do about it? People make mistakes. Lewis Hamilton was the same. Although he was a bit older when he come into the sport, but there was this sort of attitude, young drivers coming, it's like, oh, well, that's racing. This can happen. It's like, well, yes, that is true. But there is, you know, you got to pick and choose your battles. You know, sometimes you've got to learn to rein it in, as you say. And some of the younger drivers at that age in coming through junior categories have accidents like that all the time. It takes them time to develop and learn that process to realize when to go and when not to go. We can't all be Ayrton Senna and go for a gap that exists. You know, it's not as simple as that.
It's like as we had Hamilton 2011 at one point where he had that one point where he was just running into any sort of maneuver he was making. It was just it was. I think even ones that were probably genuine, it was just ended up in sort of contact in some sort of way. There was Vettel. I think in Vettel, his championship winning year, right? I think they're calling him Crash Kid at some point because I think you remember one where he hit Button in Spa, and yeah, just loads of all the drivers, even the best drivers now, like then like we're saying, Hamilton crashing into cars like so many times once in a season, and now we're sitting here seeing he's as a 7-time world champion. Is that even the best drivers, they have that time where they've got to sort of learn their trade in a sense. It's like as you would see with football, is like you need to learn your trade in a certain position. It's like at F1, you need to learn your trade of how to overtake, how to be aggressive, and when not to be aggressive. And that's why you see. That's why I like when Red Bull have got their junior team and AlphaTauri to sort of put in a Tsunoda, for example, and say, all right, prove yourself there. If you could prove yourself there, then we'll put you into the big team. So instead of just throwing them straight into a big team and expecting them to fly. And for some drivers like a Hamilton, like he did in 2007, worked brilliantly until a point where it was gonna happen where he was gonna have to learn at some point. And then you've got the good drivers where they need time. They need that time to learn their trade first before making that step to a team where they can chase for victories, chase for championships, and take it to another level. So that's where I've always maybe supported that, because then it also helps with trying to keep the racing as entertaining as possible, but as also as safe as possible as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Safety has to be the number one priority in the sport above all else. The argument with the halo back in 2014 when the prospect, or 2015, I should say, when they were first trying to introduce it. And there was so much opposition because of how it affected the aesthetics of a Formula One car. I was one of them. I remember learning about this, and it wasn't wrong to have this opinion at the time. I think now we look back on it and think, yeah, you know what, they did the right thing. But you know, the image of Formula One and how the cars are presented, the glamour that's associated with it, you don't get that in any other sport. It's the sexy motorsport as well as being the fastest one, and the cars still are. I mean, I don't really notice it that much. I mean, it's there.
No.
It's obvious when you think about it, but it's not something that bothers me. It's part of a Formula One car. If anything, you've took them off, it would look weird. That's how used we are to the Halos
It's
now.
funny. You look back at old footage, like maybe like the year before in 2017, when the new rules were introduced. You're not.
It looks weird, doesn't it? It really does. I mean, you have to go further back, like 2004, 2006 era, where the cars look fine without the halo, because we know, but
that era.
But you know, since the halo's been introduced, not just in F1 but in support races as well. I remember Roy Nissany had an incident in an F2 race.
It's a good way of putting the graphics.
Oh yeah. But they've improved on that, the TV graphics. They obviously were aware of the issues that fans were complaining about. Not really big issues when you think about it, but what they can do to improvise and innovate and make the show a bit better with the Halo is great. I love it. I mean, I was just saying that, you know, there have been incidents that have happened since the Halo has been introduced. We talk about, as I said, Nissany in an F2 race in Spain where potentially saved his life. Yuri Vips as well, of course, in Japanese Super Formula. He had an incident which the Halo did its job. Charles Leclerc at the 2018 Belgian Grand Prix. Yeah, where, you know, Hulkenberg went into the back of Alonso, sent him into Leclerc.
How to peel an orange.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. How to peel an orange. There's, I think in an F3 race as well, there was a massive accident in Monza as well, where I think the car took off or something. But
I remember that one.
Halo, the Halo did its job there.
Well, I mean, look at 2012, that incident in Belgium where Romain Grosjean was a bit too apprehensive at the start, went into Lewis Hamilton and then Maldonado. Fernando Alonso is a very lucky boy that day. I think, you know, I look at that race in particular as one of the races that potentially cost Alonso the World Championship because he didn't score any points in that race. But when you look back and think, well, he walked away. He didn't get his head caved in by, a tire or anything like that.
It was literally about not 5 or 6 centimeters.
I mean, those race suits are meant to sustain urine if the drivers need to go, they need to go. I can't imagine what was sitting at the bottom of Fernando Alonso's race suit after he saw that Lotus flying across his car. I don't even want to know, but it probably wasn't too pleasant. And I imagine he probably called up his insurers to say, I'd like to increase my life insurance, please, because I just won the lottery today. But that's what the Halo is there for. It does its job. It has been a fantastic addition to the sport, amongst other safety measures that have probably not have gone under the radar, if you like, because it's not as obvious to notice them. Like I said, the hands device or the refueling ban or the biometrics on the driver's gloves, etc. And they're going to continue to introduce new pieces of innovation to make the sport as safe as it can be. It will never be 100% safe. There's always going to be a risk with Formula One racing. And I think that's something that we were reminded of every so often. I just hope that the incidents like we saw with Romain Grosjean are a thing of the past. Probably won't be, but they're a lot fewer and further between than perhaps we're used to, because the sport has come so far and we have so many people to thank for that, some of which aren't with us anymore. But I think we'd all hope that if we do need to learn lessons about safety in the sport, it doesn't come at the cost of a driver's life or a marshal's life. I remember the one we lost in Australia 2001. I think it was an incident between Ralf Schumacher and Jacques Villeneuve, and unfortunately Marshall was caught up as collateral damage and it killed them. It's this is a sport that happens because we all share a passion of racing, and the one thing we all hope for, whether we think about it or not, is that no matter who wins, everyone gets to go home to their families and friends at the end of the day, and then we'll come back in a few weeks' time at another venue. That's what we all want. Hopefully these new safety measures that we learned from this crash with Grosjean will continue the tireless efforts to make the sport as safe as it can be.
Yes, absolutely. I was actually going to ask, and I forgot to ask in the first podcast as well, is that I think it's we all know about Murray Walker at the start of this season passed away at the age of was it 97, 98?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And what's funny is we did a fundraising stream, and it was literally a week after that, and we had David Croft, the Sky One F1 commentator, on the fundraising stream, and yeah, we were actually trying to. I was actually talking about obviously Murray Walker, sort of living in sort of the same job that he sort of made his name in, and wanted to get your thoughts about Murray Walker from you as a fan of F1.
Murray was the voice of my childhood. You know, growing up as a Formula One fan since '95, when I was first got into the sport, Murray was only in the sport for about 6 or 7 years after that. I think the Indianapolis US Grand Prix in 2001 was his final race, and Murray was he had a very loud voice, which was appropriate for Formula One cars at the time. So you could hear him over the cars. Probably didn't even need a microphone in that regard. He just stood there and talked, and people could hear him over the cars. But the mannerisms, the knowledge he had, the passion he had, the camaraderie with so many people. Murray loved everyone. He wanted everybody to do well. The stories I heard about Murray Walker were legendary. I really, really wish I could have met the man. He was a huge influence on my childhood. He was probably as much a reason as why I wanted to get into Formula One as any of the drivers ever were. He had that much of an impact in the sport. And, sadly, there will never be another Murray Walker for plenty of good reasons in terms of the F1 commentary, because some of the stuff he used to say, some of the stuff he would do, not that it was wrong, but broadcasters would be like, oh my God, mate, please be a bit more professional. But everybody loved Murray like that. Like Murray's mannerisms, a few of them I can remember off the top of my head, such as this car is absolutely unique except for the one alongside him, which is his teammate. I don't make mistakes. I make predictions which eventually turn out to be wrong. The car is absolutely fine. Nothing wrong with it except for the fact that it's on fire. And everybody loved Murray. Like, it was the amazing thing about Murray Walker that he could get something wrong, and yet people would love him.
Half the race is done, which means there's halfway left to go.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. It just showed the making of the man. That, a man that loved his motorcycles, very much involved in them, like his dad was competing, to get into Formula One. And the best part about it is that you're all in Murray's company. He's the one telling a story of how the races would go. You listen to the commentary, be glued to it. I remember seeing a comment on Twitter not long after he died, and it's basically said, I remember watching Murray Walker on a black and white TV in the 1970s and on broadcasting on the BBC back then. And most of the time it was the highlights. It wasn't the actual live broadcast. And he would bring colour to an otherwise black and white world that you'd see on your TV. And I thought that was amazing. And for me, Murray Walker was such a huge influence on my childhood. I loved the sport. I loved hearing his voice. It was the voice of Formula One. And as Damon Hill said, it's not a loss. As many people will say, it's a bit of a loss to lose Murray Walker, but Murray gave so much to the sport. Murray gave us so many great memories, so many mannerisms that we repeated on this, and many others have done so, that because of those memories and those great moments that he gave us, you never really lose someone like that. As long as he lives in the hearts of F1 fans that were lucky enough, like myself, to hear his live broadcast, and for those that heard stories of the man and watched old races just to hear the man on the microphone, that is something that completely transcends life and death, however you see it. And in Murray Walker, all I can say is that for anyone who was lucky enough to watch his races will know and share a man's passion, who just loved nothing more than to talk about Formula One cars, and he was bloody good at it. So I'm going to miss him, and I'm sure many others will too. And I'm sure we'll all allow Murray's memory to live on in our hearts and also in conversations like this one.
Yeah, and I think the sport will not forget his contribution to the sport as well, because it's just legendary. And yeah, it's like I said, it's very different It's going to be very different, and I mean, Murray will always be Murray, and that's the end of it. So, what we'll do is I'll just quickly I'll open the lines up. So if anyone does want to come on, I've just noticed something on whilst we're in the comments as well is about the Canadian Grand Prix. And they're saying it's set to be cancelled as Turkey stands by from Autosport. So let's see if I can actually open it up.
Yeah, I had heard about this yesterday. CBC Montreal had basically been putting out stories saying that there'd been fears that the Canadian Grand Prix would be cancelled on the grounds that they don't deem it safe enough to be able to host a race whilst the COVID-19 pandemic is still ongoing, and obviously there's still issues with trying to contain the virus. So it's quite worrying, not just for Canada, but potentially for races in the US, Brazil. I'm expecting the Brazilian Grand Prix to be cancelled because of what's going on there. It's just terrible in terms of how COVID-19 is running through there at the moment. So it's quite worrying in the American region at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's just absolutely raging at the minute. And it's just hope that yeah, like you said, that they can stop that straight away and actually just focus on the quarter the pandemic. And if it means that Turkey has to take its place, then hey, we had a great race in Turkey last time. It was absolutely brilliant. So hopefully it won't be as bad as before. Oh wow, Bargav is here. How are you?
Good, guys. That was a great. That was a great great talk. Actually, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that deeply. So I was just wondering, what are your top three? Who do you guys think is gonna be 1, 2, 3 this weekend?
Okay, go on, Adam. So
well, I kind of stuck my neck out and said I was expecting a Red Bull 1-2. So I don't want to go back on that because I still think Red Bull are going to be a threat. So I'm still going to stick with Red Bull 1-2 and Hamilton third. But again, it's one of those where Hamilton looks very strong in the Mercedes, so I could be completely wrong and just hand in my fraud notice right now while I'm at it. But I'm going to stick with Red Bull 1-2 and Hamilton third.
Yeah. For me, I would say, not looking at practice, it's very, very close between Hamilton and Verstappen. Very close. I would say Verstappen first, but my God, he's going to have such a job on his hands to try and stop Hamilton. Because if it's that close, then there's going to be an epic race on again. And that's what we love to see. So, yeah, but I'll be stupid to not say if Verstappen doesn't win this race. And he has to. He has to win this Grand Prix. And not that saying he wants to, but he has to. So for me, it's Hamilton, Verstappen, Bottas for me.
I mean, we shouldn't discount Bottas because last season he drove most of the race with half a Ferrari front wing lodged underneath his car, and he was still driving relatively well. So for all we know, Bottas might absolutely nail it tomorrow. I mean, he was good today in practice, and
sessions, I think, didn't he?
Exactly, yeah. So, but Bottas has had a tendency last year to be very good when the track's green and everyone's finding their feet, and then when push comes to shove, Hamilton nails it as he always does. So I'm still sticking with my prediction, but it's so tight between those top four. And who knows, we may end up seeing a Ferrari on the podium. I certainly hope so, but it's very tight. The field spread round Imola's so tight. The only two cars I know for a fact aren't going to be in the running is the Haas cars, and I'm worried that they're going to be so slow they might be a danger more than anything, or at least one of them could potentially be.
Would you say to that, Bargav?
So I think Ferrari is going to get the podium this weekend. I think I listened to like your preview with I forgot who the co-host was.
Courtney
on Imola. And you said like this isn't a Mercedes. This track doesn't suit Mercedes, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So I don't see I don't see Mercedes getting a podium this time. So I think I'm just gonna predict that just for Steven's sake.
Wow.
But I think Red Bull are gonna. I think Verstappen's gonna
I'm sorry.
win the race.
Bargo, you want drugs?
Leclerc. And I'm gonna go with like an outsider just for the heck of it.
I mean, I probably should clarify, Bargo, for the benefit of anyone watching this. When I say that this is a track that Mercedes aren't necessarily favourable of, we've only got the data for 1 year's work. So, you know, you can only draw your conclusions from that. But I usually compare it to other circuits. I mean, you could argue that Bahrain is also a circuit that Mercedes aren't necessarily favourable of. If you take the gap that they have to the rest of the field compared to other circuits, doesn't necessarily mean to say they're not going to be the favourites or they're not going to be quick. So I just want to make that clear that when I say that, I mean that Mercedes' advantage is not going to be as massive as it is at other circuits. They could very much still win. So I'm just getting that in before I have to hand in any sort of notice whatsoever.
Can I just also make a point? Like, Mercedes topped both timing sessions, and I think they got 1 and 2, I believe.
They did, but Ferrari have done that a lot over the last couple of years. Red Bull have done that a lot over the last couple of years. So
I'm just putting it out there.
I'm just saying points are scored on Sunday, not on Friday, Stephen. But it does look good. Yeah.
That's a mad prediction. I'm sorry. I can't.
I mean, we should say that there's such short running time in practice now that teams don't necessarily muck around with, irrelevant running time or anything like that for setup stuff. They kind of got it nailed on straight away. So some of the times that you do see, more often than not, are representative of where their true pace is. And judging from what we've seen, I would be very surprised if all of a sudden Mercedes end up nowhere. The only team I do think are perhaps holding back a little bit and probably will do a lot better tomorrow is McLaren, because they look nowhere today, and yet that car is probably the third fastest car on the grid. Them and Ferrari swapping, and props AlphaTauri too, but they are never going to be at the back of the field in this race. So keep an eye on McLaren.
What about Pierre Gasly?
Well, Gasly will be hoping for better fortunes because obviously he had some reliability issues that prevented him from actually running in last season's race, where Danny Kvyat actually put in a great performance and was very unlucky not to get a podium coming fourth in that race. He put off a great move at turn 9 on Charles Leclerc around the outside, but AlphaTauri's look good. Their pace, I think we all suspected, would be confirmed at this weekend. Tsunoda's doing okay, carrying on where he left off. Gasly, definitely a factor in that battle with McLaren and Ferrari, potentially for a podium if, as I said, a Mercedes or Red Bull has any issues in the race.
Wicked. Anything mad you want to say, Bargav, before we end it there?
No, that's fantastic. Now I know some stuff to when I do the watch along with Steven on Sunday. Appreciate the podcast, by the way. They're really amazing. Steven, put the link in the chat for the DNF1 podcast links.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that now.
I love your microphone, by the way, Bargav. I've got to say, that is a nice piece of kit. What mic is that?
This is the Rock Band like microphone. I just found it recently.
I love it, mate.
Give it a shot.
I love it, mate. That looks so cool. I mean, I've just got an NT USB mic from Rode, but no, that looks really, really cool. I like that.
I have like one. I have the Yetis actually, but they seem
Yetis are really good.
Like the problem with them is like if you move around, they tend to break kind of easily. That's the only problem with them.
Depends on what you do with them, mate. Like, you literally just place it there and talk. But
if you just literally, so if you move it around a lot, like it. So I've had a little bit of problems with them. So I'm switching it back to like the hand mics.
Well,
fair play.
It works. At least it works this time.
Yeah, it's true. But thank you guys.
Watch along, man. Yeah, definitely. Right, that'd be great. There's his link there. Go and subscribe to DNF1, right? If you want to know everything about Formula One and more. As I said, great show as usual. Do smash the like button, please. Do hit the subscribe button. As I said, we're trying to get to 1K. We're 130 off that. Watch hours are nearly to 4,000 as well, so we're nearly hitting the target. So please, it is for charity. Do that right now. Hit the subscribe button. And we'll be back tomorrow for qualifying itself, right, for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. So make sure you tune into that tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. But until then, everyone stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye bye.